Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American.
Trudeau finally made an appearance to talk about Trump's demand for Canada to become the 51st state. After meeting with the blobfish we call a president at his home in Mar-a-Lago, in classic Trump fashion, the lies kept coming.
But we don't need anything. We don't need their fuel. We don't need their energy. We don't need their oil and gas. We don't need anything that they have. And I said to Trudeau, I said, why are we subsidizing you $200 and $250 billion a year? He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, I don't know either. I said, what would happen to Canada if we didn't? He said, Canada would be obliterated if that happened. I said, then Canada should be a 51st state.
Does anybody know why he looks like that? Every day he's looking more and more like the peanut butter baby.
Does it feel good?
He made it seem like Trudeau was willing to give over Canada without a second thought, but that's not exactly how Trudeau says it went.
I'm assuming he didn't bring up his intention to publicly say he was going to annex through economic means your country.
It actually sort of came up at one point, and then we started musing back and forth about this. And when I started to suggest, well, maybe there could be a trade for Vermont or California for certain parts, he immediately decided that it was not that funny anymore, and we moved on to a different conversation.
Of course, Trump is the kid that as soon as you start trying to play with his toys, now he wants to play a different game. And on top of that, this little tariff game that he's playing is not funny. Most Americans are not looking to go into a tariff war with Canada.
Yeah, we're talking about tariffs, a tax a government puts on goods and services we import or export as a country. And it could affect the prices we pay on everything from building to booze.
Our long-standing economic partnership keeps millions of Americans working.
Canada's response in the brewing tariff fight, releasing this ad with a clear message. If they get new tariffs from Trump, they'll issue their own on U.S. products.
That's a great price. Last year was about $3.50.
Also wary of a tariff war, San Jose's Royal Wines and Spirits.
First impression is, oh boy.
Where owner David Tabibian is aware that the U.S. imported 82 million liters of Canadian whiskey last year. Add a tariff to that,
It will eventually end up as a price increase on the shelf, and customers are aware of that.
do you have to pass on the cost to them?
We absolutely have to.
Not everyone knows that, and Trump has in the past incorrectly stated that tariffs are paid by the country that imports things. They're actually paid by us.
Because it turns out most Americans think that tariffs are paid by them and that tax cuts are for us. But Trudeau's response to this whole 51st state thing is exactly right. I'm going to play the full clip for you here.
President-elect Trump has been needling you a bit, calling you Governor Trudeau, talking about making Canada the 51st state. Did you have any interaction with him today?
No, not today. But that's not going to happen. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American. There is such a depth of pride that that's not actually an issue. What I think is happening in this is President Trump, who's a very skillful negotiator, is getting people to be somewhat distracted by that conversation, to take away from the conversation around 25% tariffs on oil and gas and electricity and steel and aluminum and lumber and concrete, and everything the American consumers buy from Canada is suddenly going to get a lot more expensive if he moves forward on these tariffs. And that's something that I think we need to be focusing on a little bit more.
I think he's 100% correct. Now, I wouldn't call Trump a skilled negotiator. He can't even convince a woman to sleep with him without either paying her or assaulting her. So instead, I'd call him a con man. And one of the core aspects of a con is distraction. Trump knows that his tariffs are not popular, so he wants to distract everybody with the smoke and mirrors that is this whole 51st state thing. Because the tariffs are an objectively horrible idea, and I don't know why Trump thinks that Canada and Mexico are just going to bend over and take it.
Let's talk about this potential 25% tariff from the United States on Canada. Economists say that will drive the Canadian economy into a recession, and the Canadian government is preparing retaliatory tariffs if these actually go through. Which do you think would be potentially the most effective against the United States? I don't want them, by the way, just as an American, I don't want these tariffs, but minerals, energy?
We don't want them either. We do not want to see tariffs on our side. We do not want to see tariffs on your side. It's bad for people who have, for generations, made things together and been successful together to actually start creating barriers between economies like ours. Like, we have so many resources in Canada, more than our market can support. So we export them to our closest friend who can rely on them. It is a win-win for us. We would definitely respond, as we did years ago when President Trump put tariffs on steel and aluminum. We responded by putting tariffs on Heinz ketchup, on playing cards, on bourbon, on Harley Davidsons, on things that would hurt American workers. But we don't want to do that because it drives up prices for Canadians and it harms our closest trading partner.
And it's not just booze and motorcycles that are going to get more expensive. You have to remember that it's not just Canada and Mexico and Greenland that Trump is picking fights with. His last trade war was against China, and he's not going to let that one go either. So if we're fighting that side of the economic war as well, then we're going to need a lot more precious minerals for electric vehicles and computers, as well as energy, both of which we get a lot of from Canada. And they're not exactly willing to share if Trump is playing bully ball.
You're threatening to cut off the energy supply to the United States. Now you're pitching further integration. Is this a climb down by Ontario, or is this the carrot to go with the stick?
I think more to the latter. I think what the Premier is saying is there's a clear preference for continental energy security. The U.S. congressional leaders that we've spoken to for the past several months have come to us looking for more energy, looking for our critical minerals and rare earths. They're looking for access to some of Canada's bounty when it comes to our natural resources. That is our value proposition from a national security and economic prosperity perspective. So we've built a plan, this AMCAN, this Fortress AMCAN, the idea of this continental approach to energy integration, giving preferential access to the Americans where they need, given that China has made clear that China and their proxies will be decoupling from the United States. So it is in the U.S. interest, based on American advice, and I believe this is a better way forward. The Premier believes this too. But I just want to make clear, though, on what we talked about a month ago, if the U.S. decides, and should the federal government not be able to dissuade the president-elect to drop this 25% tariff, then we will respond with force in the defense of our jobs and our supply chain. But it's just not our preference. We really want to work together with the U.S.
Because why wouldn't we work together? Instead of building the economic security of American workers here in the United States by building stronger business partnerships with our two biggest allies, Trump has decided he wants to scratch his imperialistic itch and start the weirdest version of World War III anybody would have thought of. But Trump blows a lot of hot air out of both ends, so it's yet to be seen whether all of this is just talk. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.